Gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the 2013 Chapman Leadership Honors. Please join us now in a tribute to Alva H. Chapman, Jr.
When Alva and I were in Utah at Brigham Young University, and he was making a speech to a large auditorium filled with students. And he made his speech, and then there was the question and answer period. And this young man got up in the back of the room, held up his hand. He said, "Mr. Chapman, I want to know what are the 3 or 4 things you would contribute your success to." And I think Alva was a little taken back, but he thought, and he said, first, he said, "Number 1, it's my faith. Number 2, it's my happy marriage. Number 3, my family. And number 4, my training at the Citadel."
When Alva finished his tour of duty as a bomber pilot and squadron commander in World War II, he signed up. He didn't have to. He signed up for another 25 missions. Before those 25 were completed, the war was won. But he wasn't one to say, "Okay, I've done my duty, it's all over, thank you very much." He signed up again. Alva had a very strong sense of honor and duty from his experience at the Citadel.
Well, I suppose the 2 words "greatest generation" have become so overused that we shouldn't use them anymore, but I'm going to use it one more time. This is a man flying bomber missions over Europe with a huge mortality rate, surviving, coming back home, and then expressing that kind of leadership that he did in his early 20s for the next 60 years.
As he got older and was more and more and more successful, he'd built a great company, Knight Ridder, which he brought together, Knight and Ridder, and then for, I think it was 17 years, he had 13% compounded earnings, an extraordinary record.
When we moved here, and he was going up on the expressway, and he saw people living in cardboard boxes, he said, "Betty, we've got to do something about this." He wanted to do more than feed and clothe them. He wanted to see that they could move on to a better life.
Alva lived his Christian faith. He felt from his core that he was his brother's keeper.
You know, something else that defined Alva was his sense of family, and certainly his own personal family. I mean, Betty was his partner in everything, as he used to say, and his angel. He always liked to use the analogy of angels, and there was no greater angel for Alva than Betty, and they were wonderful partners. But his family was always very important to him, but that concept of family that he personally had also demonstrated itself or illustrated itself in the broader community.
After Hurricane Andrew, that President Bush, the elder President Bush, announced on national TV that they were appointing Alva to be the head of the organization that was going to work to rebuild Miami-Dade County. And Mr. Chapman was not expecting that to be announced right at that time. They had to just put in a whole bank of telephones and just grab people up from everywhere to start answering them. And in the middle of all this craziness, Mr. Chapman was as calm as could be. He walked into this new office where he was going to be sitting, and he sat down and he started making those telephone calls. He started figuring out his plan. How are we going to make this happen?
No, I think Alva is without a doubt the number 1 citizen of Miami in modern times. So after Henry Flagler and Julia Tuttle and the wave of people that first came, Alva, without a doubt, it's no one is contributed like Alva has.
Alva, in this community, put FIU on the map. Alva joined our board, and he was the longest-serving chairman of the FIU Foundation Board of Trustees. During that time, he helped us to get fundraising going. If there's someone in our community, present or past, the last 50 years, which is what I am used to, that deserves the title or deserves the moniker of great man, great leader, it is Alva Chapman.
He was one of a kind.
Alva was a man of faith. He was active in our church. He was, through the years, he was a Sunday school teacher. He served on boards, committees, and he was a firm believer. And we were blessed to have 65 years of happiness together. As busy as he was, he always had time to share time with his family.
What a beautiful and fitting tribute to a singular man. What a privilege, what an honor to have all of you here with us this evening. What a response to Alva, to Alberto Ibargüen, and to FIU. I'm Michael Putney from Channel 10. It's my privilege to serve as the MC tonight. I was asked to do this a couple of months ago by Mitch Medique, and as we all know, anybody in this room knows when Mitch asks you to do something, it's very hard to say no. But I was very happy to say yes, because a couple of reasons. Number one, FIU is one of the indispensable institutions in our community. This community wouldn't be what we are without FIU. And we are obviously here at the Graham Center this evening for the Chapman Center Leadership Honors, and I'm very fortunate that I worked for Alva Chapman. I considered him, after we got to know each other, my friend, and he was, for me, a mentor and role model. And I remember, Betty, coming to your home a couple of times to interview him. Those are vivid memories for me and wonderful memories. And then finally, I think it's a privilege to be here tonight to take part in honoring an extraordinary leader who has contributed so much to our community and indeed to the country and continues to do so, and that is Alberto Ibargüen. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that Alva was the chairman and a great newspaper man at night and then Knight Ridder newspapers. Alberto was the chairman of the publisher of the Miami Herald, El Nuevo before that. Your previous recipient of the Transcendent Award was David Lawrence, who was with us this evening. And in a much more minor role, I am a proud alumnus of the Miami Herald, still proud to contribute an op-ed column. So while the power of newspapers for financial reasons may be fading, I think that the recipients of these awards show that the power of principled leadership is not. So let's move on here, and let me introduce some people to you. I want to recognize some of the, well, first of all, the Chapman family, and that begins with the one and only Betty. Betty Chapman is here with us this evening. Betty. And Aubrey is also here tonight, I believe. Aubrey, where are you? There you are. Aubrey has come back from Afghanistan, where he, I believe, served in the Army. Maybe you still are in the Army, but you were in prisons doing work there very much in the tradition of your grandfather. Thank you for your service. And Dale Webb, Dale, there you are. I didn't even get to say hello to you this evening. How are you? And Dale, it's great to see you, and you also carry on the great tradition of your father. Is there anybody I've missed there? Maybe I did. If I did, I apologize. I'm a little out of order. Christine, where do we go here? Okay. Oh, yeah, we're going to recognize, thank you very much. We're going to recognize all the members of the FIU Board of Trustees and the Foundation Board. Would you all stand up and let us give you a round of applause? The FIU Board of Trustees members, among those with us this evening, are our friend Jorge Arizurrieta. Jorge, it's always good to see you. And Trustee Delano Gray. Mr. Gray, thanks for your service. The FIU senior leadership, of course, is here with us. College of Business Dean David Klock, Senior Vice President Sandy Gonzalez-Levy, Provost Doug Wartzak, President, the one and only Mark Rosenberg, extraordinary leader, and the inaugural transcendent leader who I mentioned a minute ago, David Lawrence. To all of you, thank you for being here. Stand up and let us properly, all the people I mentioned. Come on, Mark, stand up. Thank you. Further, the event this evening would not be possible without the generous support of many wonderful partners. We met some of them here at the reception. The reception sponsor is Mercantile Commerce Bank. The Emerging Leader Award sponsor is the Alva H. and Wileen P. Chapman Foundation, and the supporting sponsors, the Chapman Partnership and the Wolfsonian Florida International University Museum and the FIU College of Business. All right, at this moment, it's my privilege to introduce somebody who we all know and respect and love and have been caught up in the tornado that is Mitch Medique. So please welcome the former president of FIU, Mitch Medique.
Thank you very much. It's not exactly the way we had planned it, but it's close enough. I'd like for a member of our Board of Advisors, Alex Villock, to join me on stage, and Dale Chapman Webb for the presentation of the Emerging Leader Award.
Ready? Good evening. Thank you very much, Mitch. I would like to take first a moment for another round of applause for the Chapman family and for all of our honored guests. Dale and I are here this evening on behalf of the Emerging Leader Award Review Committee. The review committee members included the two of us, Mitch Medique, who serves as the executive director of the Center for Leadership, Bisham Secharan, a member of the Center's Board of Advisors, and Jose de la Torre, Dean Emeritus of the College of Business and a member of the Center's Academic Advisory Board. We had the very difficult task of evaluating the nominees for this prestigious honor.
The Emerging Leader Award that we present tonight is really inspired by the transcendent leaders who've come before. My father, Alva Chapman, our inaugural honoree, Dave Lawrence, and the transcendent leader that we are honoring tonight, Alberto Ibargüen. Tonight we're here to honor an additional individual who is part of a new generation of leaders, inspired by the tradition of those that I've just mentioned. She has dedicated her young life to provide innovative solutions to social and business challenges that our community faces. In doing so, she helps create a better quality of life for all of us. I am pleased to announce that this year's emerging leader is Dr. Susan Amat. Dr. Amat, will you come up?
Dr. Susan Amat is certainly one of our community's rising stars. Dr. Amat started her first business at the tender age of 15 as a concert promoter. After graduating from the University of Miami, she put her PhD to work as the co-founder of UM's Launchpad, which has been replicated with support from the Blackstone Charitable Foundation across the nation, creating the only national network of collegiate entrepreneurs. More recently, she moved on to create the Venture Hive Accelerator with support from the Miami Downtown Development Authority and Miami-Dade Mayor Carlos Jimenez. Venture Hive serves 35 companies and over 100 entrepreneurs. Venture Hive now also offers a university-based program, Venture Hive U, and the first technology entrepreneurship magnet high school, Venture Hive Prep. Dr. Amat serves as the chair of Startup Florida, Startup America Partnership, and is the chair of the STEM board for Miami-Dade County Public Schools. In March of last year, Dr. Amat was honored at the White House as a champion of change for her work mentoring entrepreneurs. I've had the privilege of watching Susan in action over the last 3 years with One Community, One Goal. She is a whirlwind. She's passionate. She's open about sharing what she knows with everyone who will give her a minute, and she will hook you into her passion for this city, this community, and what she believes so firmly will help transform us.
This recognition does symbolize the aspiration to transcendent leadership that is to be pursued by each new generation to build a better world by engaging with society to create solutions to tangible and practical ways. At this time, on behalf of the FIU Center for Leadership and the Chapman Foundation, I'm pleased to introduce to you Dr. Susan Amat, our Emerging Leader honoree for 2013. Please join me in congratulating Dr. Amat. This was not part of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
It
much.
is my honor on part of the Center for Leadership and Florida International University and the Chapman Foundation to present this award to you, Dr. Susan Amat.
Thank you very much. So first I have to thank you for calling me young. Thank you. Dr. Madiq told me a couple times, you know how great his jokes are, how a few more months I would not have been able to qualify for this. So I really appreciate the timing was perfect. So I have to thank the Chapman family and Dr. Madiq and the board and staff of the Center for Leadership for this incredible honor, especially after seeing that video. I mean, I'm just so touched by the story, and it's really moving, especially to have something in his honor. This year has been a roller coaster of emotion, leaving the security of the University of Miami to build a startup to support other startups, which is sadomasochism on a whole other level. In just 9 months, Venture Hive has put Miami on the international tech map with 17 businesses relocating from all over Latin America, New York, and California. And the State Department has sent companies from the Caribbean to our team in downtown Miami for training, and that continues. We're going to be hosting a bunch of startups from all over Latin America in December, as well as part of the State Department's La Idea initiative. And it really is just an incredible opportunity for me to be able to showcase Miami for the way that I see it and the way I hope the world soon will see it as well. But all of this builds upon the fact that I've gotten such incredible nurturing for the community for so many years. Leaders across South Florida gave me opportunities to push myself and learn through trial and error. Dr. Shalala gave me a grant to support my dissertation research about the role that mentoring plays in creating a culture for innovation. The University of Miami administration asked me to develop a new program in the Career Center, which allowed me to build upon my radical at the time thoughts about what entrepreneurship education should be. The Miami Downtown Development Authority took a chance having me join their tech advisory board, which led to starting and building Venture Hive. Mayor Jimenez and his staff committed support to the Tech Startup Initiative in our first meeting, and then played a vital role and really led the formation of Venture Hive Prep in partnership with the superintendent and the school board. Giving access to experiential learning, to support and resources makes the American dream within everyone's reach, and that creating solutions to problems is something anyone can do. That takes risks. It's about creating jobs and creating the wealth that makes philanthropy possible. And that's what makes our country so great. It's not just that people can start with nothing and build a fortune, but that so many of them choose to use it to give others that fishing rod. So it's not just giving it away to give people the fish, but really then put the tools and support in place so that they can create those lives for themselves. The leader most aspiring to me is my husband. He's a double FIU alum who provides the strength and the vision at our home so I can go back into the world with a clear head and heart to focus on supporting the community. Lewis continues to make incredible sacrifices so I can live the dream of empowering others to self-realize through entrepreneurship. He's a lead investor in every ridiculous idea I come up with, and I keep pulling him into crazy stuff, which Alex alluded to. But I have to thank him for being such an incredible partner to me and a wonderful husband and parent to our children and a great business partner. And thank you for keeping your job so that I can keep playing for a little while longer. So thank you again for this honor, and I really, it's especially wonderful to be here at FIU receiving something like this. So thank you very much.
Well done, and congratulations, Dr. Amat, for a well-deserved honor. All right, let me now reintroduce, not that he needs it, Mitch Medique. One thing that I think about Mitch that we all, I think, share is leadership. It's really hard to define, but you know it when you see it, and we know it when we see it in Mitch Medique, who is the perfect person to be the Alva H. Chapman Jr. Chair in Leadership here. Mitch?
It's very difficult to top, if it's even possible, Armando Codina. But I think Armando Codina said it best. Alva was one of a kind. And I regret that not all of you in the room, particularly younger folks, students and what have you, didn't have a chance to meet him. Let me tell you a little story, not about Alva, but that illustrates, you know, who Alva was. About 15 years ago, I had lunch with the Dalai Lama. We spent an hour or two together. And after lunch, quick story, I lost him. I couldn't find him anywhere. I was sweating. And I went into the industrial-sized kitchen, you know, of the presidential home, thinking they might have seen him somewhere. And there he was, pulling on the ears of the people that served the dinner, the people that prepared the dinner, the people that brought the dinner, the people that were cleaning, all 8 or 10 of the people that were there. Now that's part of the story, but the other story is I'm writing a book called Gratitude, the Power of the G Factor in Leadership, and I interviewed these people. These people, part of a catering company. They have presidents, vice presidents, ministers, senators. They told me that no one had impacted them more in their lives and all these people that they have met and served than the Dalai Lama. That is not the whole story. One woman told me, and a couple of them said the same thing, after I met the Dalai Lama, I was no longer the same person. That man transformed who I was. And that's the way I feel about Alva. And many of you who knew him well probably share that feeling. If you knew Alva, there was something magical, I dare say even divine, that he transferred over to you. And to this day, when I do something, I say, would Alva approve of this? Would this be okay, with Alva? And I think he quietly inspired a whole generation of other leaders. Alberto Barguin is an excellent example. David Lawrence, Armando Cadena, and there are many others who consider themselves disciples, of Alva Chapman. I certainly look at him as the penultimate mentor, having a moral compass that always pointed in the right direction. Not only was he extremely talented, but he had that bedrock, of a moral compass. Tonight, it is our honor to honor someone who, much like Alva, through his civic activities and role and as president of the Knight Foundation, is helping to build a better South Florida. Let's take a look at the impact that Mr. Ibargüen is having and continues to have. If I could have the video now.
I think the special thing about Alberto is that he is a visionary leader, and he pushes everyone around them to really not accept the status quo and to shoot to be the best that you can be. I mean, that is what really makes him someone that you want to work for.
Alberto is one of those unique leaders that understands how one can bring out the best in those around them. And in fact, organizations that he's leading. And so that's what's made him so special. He's been able to take some high-performing organizations, like the Miami Herald, the Nuevo Herald, and certainly at the Knight Foundation, and take them to the next level, and take them to that unique place of being able to make a bigger impact than they were making before.
I happen to have had a discussion with him about getting involved in some other organizations sort of outside what the Wolfstonian does, and he immediately responded with a list of 10 people that he was willing to put me in touch with. He was under no sense of obligation, or he didn't have a particularly close relationship with me and didn't need to do that. But I think that's the kind of guy he is. He's all about connecting people who want to get involved, but don't necessarily know how to get involved or what angle to get involved through.
I think his actions speak, his commitment to his community speak about who he is. And it's not just about him, it's him and Susanna and their commitment to this community. He never gets tired of that energy, that twinkle in his blue eyes, that is just an energy that's infectious and spreads across an organization, makes everybody want to step up.
I always tell people that we're fortunate to have someone like Alberto here in South Florida because of what he's done in the organizations that he's led and what he's done for South Florida. But Alberto's not just a South Florida leader. He's not only a Hispanic leader. He's a world-class leader that happens to be Hispanic and happens to be from South Florida. The breadth of experience that he has on sitting on many Fortune 500, Fortune 100 boards is something that has benefited us because he has brought those lessons and those learnings to us here in South Florida, and that's what really has begun to impact our community in so many ways.
We talk a lot about that Renaissance man. That is Alberto. He knows about culture, he knows about arts, he's always reading something, he's always provoking you about something that you didn't know about.
He also has created events like random acts of culture, of just bringing the whole idea of what culture can be into many, many surprising areas of the city, of the community, of really letting it permeate in the most visionary manner. And that vision and that sense of humor And that sense of tremendous optimism is what Alberto brings to everything.
Alberto has led the Knight Foundation to invest and identify the best ways to build not only emerging leaders, but that next generation of leaders that are coming through the ranks, not only here in South Florida, but throughout our country.
At the Miami Herald, Alberto was willing to challenge anybody and everybody. He really felt that we needed to get closer to the community. We needed to understand it better. We needed to know more people. We needed to get out of the office and hear different perspectives. He always said that we had not heard all points of view, and he was right about that.
I think community is huge to Alberto, and it's about what can make Miami the best that it can be, and get all of us involved in making that better Miami. He also, in the Knight Foundation, leads across doing that and replicating that across all the Knight communities where the Knight brothers had newspapers originally.
I've known Alberto for over 10 years, and what I like and love most about him is that he's someone that gives of his heart, but also of his mind, to his friends, but also to the community around him, and that's what makes him so special.
Is designed to do two things. One, to recognize someone who transcends his role, transcends his particular organization, and makes a contribution that is for the greater good. That's one thing. The other is it reflects the renewal of the values and the commitment of Alva Chapman. And I can't think of anybody better to reflect both of those, both his contribution to the greater good and the connection, the relationship, to Alva. So it's my pleasure to recognize the 2013 Transcendent Leader Award, Alberto Ibargüen. I'd like to ask President Rosenberg to join me for the presentation of the award.
Thank you so much, Mitch. And Michael, before, I was talking in the reception with Jesse Brooks from the Chamber of Commerce, who said that his role tonight was to remind me that everybody puts his pants on one leg at a time, so don't believe anything that you see in that video. But Jesse, I don't really need that because I just have a text from my very close friend and colleague, Mayur Patel, who says, congrats on becoming a transcendent leader. My Hindu father would be most impressed. This is my staff. This is how they treat me. Thank you, President Mark Rosenberg, as well as President Emeritus Mitch Maydeek, for allowing me a role in FIU's now annual celebration of leadership in the name and memory of Alva Chapman. It's a singular privilege for which I'm grateful and sincerely humbled. I'm honored, too, to be in the company of good friends, Alex Vuyuk and Dale Webb, whose work in business and in this community I've admired and had the privilege to support for a decade, and Susan Amat, whom I've only recently met, but who clearly is the kind of person that makes one optimistic about Miami. And if you want more reasons to be optimistic, get to know the group of Emerging Leader Award nominees. I know several of them, and I couldn't be prouder to call them friends and leaders in my community. If you look at the list, you'll see that it's an eclectic group, diverse in background and fields. They have in common an amazing work ethic, a drive to succeed and do good, and a sense of place. Thanks also to my friends on the video who were ridiculously generous. I appreciate that. And of course, there are two people that I want to mention, and a third. The first one is David Lawrence, who gave the inaugural address for the Chapman Leadership Awards. David was not only my boss at the Miami Herald, he actually is the person who offered me the job that allowed me to come to Miami. And so, David, I continue 20 years later to be grateful for your great insight in offering me that. Thank you. And of course, Betty Chapman, thank you for being here tonight with us, Betty. Betty was, as someone said, as Sergio said in the video, was Alva talked about her as his wife and partner in everything. She is a woman of intelligence and spirit who was also his center. And I'm proud, too, that my wife, Susana, is in the audience. We've known each other since high school, and I have loved her ever since. That sort of relationship mattered to Alva. That kind of relationship mattered to Alva. It matters to me, and if you're lucky, it will matter to you as well. When Mitch asked me to speak about Alva and leadership, he reminded me that I'd be speaking at a university with students and faculty present, and that I should also share some early experiences. And I really hadn't thought about watching sort of my aging process on the video. That is frightening. But some of the things I was thinking about happened when I looked like I looked in some of those photographs. I am happy to do that, although I don't particularly like to talk about my own experiences. But I never did believe the phrase when I was in school that when you get out into the real world is wherever you are, and what you're doing now is going to affect who you will be and how you will think for decades to come. So let me tell you two quick stories about events in my life that to this day impact the way I think about my work, the way I think about my life, the way I think about Knight Foundation. The first one was very short. Victor Butterfield was president of the university, Wesleyan University, when I attended there. He was at the matriculation exercises. He told us that if these next are the 4 best years of your life, Wesleyan will have failed, because the purpose of a great liberal education is to teach you how to always keep on learning. The second is in the same place 3 or so years later. I was editor of the paper. I went down to see a concert by a fellow named John Cage. It was a concert in electronic music. I didn't know what that was. I thought I should find out. And it was in the chapel. This was 1965, I guess. And it was in the chapel, and the man had put up steel or some sort of metal planks thrusting out toward the audience in descending order, put microphones along the side, and he stood in the back and he rolled ball bearings. And they went plink, plank, plink, and made sounds. And I thought, holy cow, this is music. And if this is music, then there are no rules except the blinders were willing to accept. I thought, yes, many times those experiments don't work. But think about it. Jack Knight in 1948 was talking about faxing his newspapers to his customers. In a television interview in the early 90s, Alva Chapman and Jim Batten were talking about something called Viewtron, on which Knight Ridder lost tons of money. They were talking about wanting to be there when their customers arrived for electronically delivered news. Did it work? In that case, no. In the first one, Jack wasn't far off. They didn't exactly work, but it helped to learn and led to other experiments that did. Jack Knight said that and I have a wonderful tape of him where he says he wants to be known as a guy who printed good newspapers, was fair, open-minded, and opinionated. You look at the realistic options, you stay open to learning, you make up your mind and move forward. That's a great way to lead through disruption. And that's when somebody asked me what would be the title of this talk, it would be just that, leading through disruption. I could have simply called it disruption and described in one word the exciting history of our town. From the time it was officially chartered about 107 years ago, Miami has seen booms and busts only to rise again. We've created a community where 3/4 of us come from someplace else and 1/2 from another country. Who does that? Our immigration, unlike any other part of the United States, is based on a concept of exile, with people proud of where they came from and often planning to return. It has been and is both a place people come from for retirement and a place people come from all over for a lifetime of opportunity. To lead through that much disruption, you need to lead with passion and vision, as if this place and this time and this thing that we're all doing together deeply matters, because it does. It matters for today and tomorrow, all of us in it. That's how Alva led, and it is worth a look at the man to learn what we can do to go forward. I'll apologize here because I love to talk about Alva Chapman and what I've learned from him, and some of you may have heard some of these, heard me talk about Alva and told some of these stories. But I'm mindful too that we are at a university with students and others in the room who only know Alva as a corporate mover and shaker or a name on the business school. I think it's important that you have a sense of Alva as he was, not merely as he has been lionized. I first had that sense, actually, not about Alva, but this was years and years ago, when I was at Wesleyan still and had the opportunity to meet Martin Luther King, who came to Wesleyan to give the graduation speech. It was a Sunday morning. There were a number of reporters. I was allowed to go because I was there for the Wesleyan Argus, and he was tired. He was exhausted. He looked like he'd either been up all night or just was concerned about something else. Coretta Scott King sat right behind him in a scarlet red dress and a scarlet red hat. That was those pillbox hats, the Jackie Kennedy hats that the people wore at the time. He was asked questions. I wish I could tell you we had asked him brilliant questions. We were as much in awe of him as you could be after the speeches that he had given and the importance of this man even in that time. He answered our questions politely. I don't remember. I just remember a sense of a guy who was just exhausted trying to get through the interview. He did politely. And a couple of hours later, he stood out on the great lawn on this huge terrace, marble terrace that Wesleyan has. It looks over a rolling terrace and a great football field. And he gave what I now know, I didn't then, what I now know was something of a stump speech for him. He gave the speech about the arc of justice, the arc of history bending toward justice, and he gave the speech about if the mountain won't come to Muhammad, Muhammad will go to the mountain. And I swear on that cloudy day, the clouds parted and the sun shone. At least that's how I remember it. And I also remember thinking, when the chips are down, the big guy or the big woman steps up and does the job. One of my earliest memories of Alva Chapman was seeing him and Betty dancing at a black tie gala, and another is of Alva and Betty at her birthday party a few years ago. This titan of industry was actually playful and loving. Those memories stand out because he's now mainly referred to as serious and noble. He was also, however, a man of power and action. He relished power He used power. He took action. He was a disciplined man, and he was as tough a guy as you ever want to negotiate anything with. Even if you weren't negotiating, you knew that you were in a tough discussion. If we forget that, we forget his humanity, and if we forget his humanity, we've invented somebody who didn't exist. When the opportunity came to head Knight Foundation, of course I sought and received Alva's advice and thoughtful counsel. He had helped lead the foundation for 31 years. He was on that board. During that time, he had a hand in virtually every critical decision at the foundation and in the disbursement of hundreds of millions of dollars over time to journalism programs and to good works in communities where Jack and Jim Knight, and Alva too, had run their newspapers. Alva was a community builder, and so the foundation's capacity to do not just good but to transform community was compelling. We are in the business, we at the Knight Foundation are in the business, I think, of promoting democracy and building community. And when we look for ideas and leaders to back, we almost inevitably find 5 characteristics that lead to transformational change. And I refer to them as discovery, vision, courage, know-how, and tenacity. It's really a very simple list, and I promise you it comes up virtually every time. Discovery is journalism at its most fact-based, discovering facts as they are, not as you wish them to be. I was actually never prouder when I was publisher of the Herald than on those days when we exposed and explained simply and clearly so readers, citizens could make up their own minds and pursue their own interests. Vision is the capacity to see more or different from what others see. A glass turned upside down is a platform, not a vessel. Miami mayors Ferre and Diaz, I think, each in their own way, had a vision of a shining city in the future. Were they perfect? Of course not. And are we a better place because of what they saw? Absolutely yes. Courage to put yourself out and take risks, stand for something, and live the new idea. I don't think he's still here, but Norman Brayman is an example of that. He needs publicity like a hole in the head, but he takes his positions, he takes his public positions because he believes in principle and has the courage to back his words with his deeds. Know-how is perhaps the simplest to understand. Either you have it or you get it, but you don't pretend you have, but don't pretend you have it because you'll fail if you do. Ted and Lynn Harrison didn't play music. They found Michael Tilson Thomas, and the rest is history. Tenacity, the capacity to stick to the project no matter the odds, the ability of a Woody Weiser and Parker Thompson to hang in for 20 years before the Performing Arts Center became reality. Or actually, I mentioned Dave earlier, or all of these, think of it, think of all of those: discovery, vision, courage, know-how, and capacity, and think whether when Dave started the early childhood readiness, whether any of us would have given him a dime to bet on that we would tax ourselves so that children would be better off, and yet he did it, and that is transcendent leadership. At the foundation, we look for those 5 characteristics in journalism, community, and arts programs, and we try to change with the times. And so in journalism and media innovation, we've actually evolved to where MIT is our principal journalism and media innovation school. Who'd have thunk that? Because it's the kind of place where they're inventing the technology that we will use to communicate, and we need to understand how and why it works, not just how to use it. And we fund innovation and modernization in journalism curricula at a dozen schools through the Carnegie Knight Initiative. The newspaper industry has been in a state of disruption since cable news provided a wider range of news options than ever imagined. On the one hand, and Monster and Craigslist showed that there were more efficient ways to deliver classified advertising. AOL, Yahoo, and Google began to show what the web might be for And that was years before we had ever heard of social media, of Facebook, or of Twitter, and a nearly infinite list of apps and websites that help make our lives today crazy and varied, meaningful, and useful. I won't go there, but anyone who thinks that this kind of fundamental disruption in the way we communicate does not affect their business or their lives is simply not paying attention. It was perhaps more obvious in the newspaper business or in the music industry than in others, say than in medicine or at a university teaching, but it is just as real, and if it hasn't hit yet, it's coming. Change happens over time and accumulated experience. To capture learning during the times of fast change, we at Knight are putting increasing energy and resources into prototype funding. Lots of small grants, many, many experiments. We experiment, learn, fail fast, and learn again, iterating and moving along ideas that may not work or don't work yet, but might later. In Miami, we also fund the arts and entrepreneurship. Art inspires and makes us better than ourselves. For a community as diverse, as broad as we are, what could be more appropriate? Art also binds us to each other and to place. We fund institutions and grassroots through the Knight Arts Challenge, so our hand is behind classical music and museums, as well as dropping poetry on a new wave music crowd a year ago from a helicopter during a concert, but it was written with vegetable ink on biodegradable paper, so it was absolutely green. To borrow in word and concept from James Joyce, we seek to make art general in this town. That was from the last paragraph of a book by his called The Dead. Yes, we want them to say the newspapers had it right. Art was general in Miami. And what town in America is more obviously built, as Susan Amat was talking a few minutes ago, on the back of entrepreneurship and commerce? Our role as a foundation as a foundation with roots both in the town and in technology, is to support organizations like the Lab Miami and Endeavor, which find, network, train, develop, and help fund entrepreneurs who will go on to create jobs and wealth and benefits in the community. We welcome the entry announced just this week of Goldman Sachs and Miami-Dade College with the program 100,000 Jobs, formed around a curriculum developed at Babson College for entrepreneurs. Discovery, vision, courage, know-how, and tenacity. That's what we look for. I'd like to conclude tonight with a quick reference back to the story about Victor Butterfield at Wesleyan, telling us that the purpose of a great liberal education was to always keep on learning. I think I've tried to live that. I think I have. And one of the reasons I'm inspired to has to do with my last Alva story, which is actually a Betty Chapman story. When El Nuevo Herald won the Ortega y Gasset Prize in Spain, which is a great honor in Spanish language journalism, I'd had a call from Alva. I was actually out of town. I returned the call. Betty answered the phone. I said, "Betty." She said, "Yes." In that Georgia accent I wish I could really imitate, but I try. Every time I tell this story, I try. Betty said, "Yes." She congratulated me on our award and said that she had told Alva, and I'm not making this up, that she had told Alva, "You know, Alva, if Knight Ridder," I can't do the accent, but anyhow, she said, "if Knight Ridder has the best Spanish language newspaper in the world, why, maybe we ought to learn to speak Spanish." And I was speechless. I said, "So Betty, what did Alva say?" And he said, "Betty, I think our Spanish learning days are over." But that was Betty Chapman. She is gentle but indomitable of spirit, optimism, and hope for better. She is inspiring us, as my college president did, to always keep on learning. For 3 decades and through all manner of disruptions, Alva used Knight Foundation as a kind of bridge as he evolved from corporate leader to community activist. He was the definition of transformational leadership, guiding people to look inward so they might discover power in themselves and a deeper connection with others. It is through those connections that we can tap the place where power is not power over someone, but rather power to unleash collective creativity, inventing a new and better society. Thank you, Alva. Thank you all.
Alberto, thank you. You are a master of creative disruption and doing wonderful things at the Knight Foundation. Alberto has agreed to answer questions for a few minutes, so if you have a question you would like to ask, there are some microphones that are being distributed throughout the room, and step forward and tell us who you are and what your question is. How about a question? I've got a question. Could I begin with one? You are encouraging all these new news platforms. Tell us about some of the platforms, the ones that you think are working and some of the ones that may not have.
Well, I'd rather talk about the ones that I think might work. We're actually about to do another round of funding for probably a dozen or 15 online news operations. Look, we're at a point where nobody really knows what the ultimate, what the equivalent of a newspaper business model or a television news business model is going to be. And so right now, I think what we need to do is to continue experimenting, not just with technology, but with different business models to see what happens. So we support strongly, for example, the Texas Tribune, which has become, I think, in 3 years, the leading source of information about Texas politics. That's all they do. If you're online, this is all online. If you're singing opera, don't expect a review in the Texas Tribune. If you're singing in Los Angeles, don't expect a review in the Voice of San Diego. But the Voice of San Diego has a series, is actually one of the most interesting and best financed of the online news operations. They are all experimenting with membership, think subscriptions. They're experimenting with events that they charge for. They obviously, the ones we support are largely set up as nonprofits. We're talking with the IRS. Should news be considered part of the definition of education in the 501c3 section of the IRS? We have actually had some good discussions with them. Is it because we believe that news is essential for a well-functioning community? We think that it should be allowed as a protected activity that people could make contributions. We'll see where that develops. And we don't know. Remember, I just mentioned Facebook and Twitter. For Pete's sake, you know, when I went to Knight Foundation, Facebook was still in college. Twitter had not yet tweeted. And when I look at every one of the contests that we do, because we actually took the position that we didn't know the answer and it was okay to admit it. So we started doing contests that said, all right, what's your idea? We want to do news and information delivered to communities on digital platforms. Got any ideas? We've got some money. We're willing to play. And we've gotten thousands of ideas, and many of them don't work. Many of them don't work because they were pretty dumb ideas in the first place. I wish I'd figured that out before we gave them money. But sometimes they don't work because the people have a great idea but aren't quite business savvy. Sometimes, but you know, in the end, I remain, as Cornel West used to say, a prisoner of hope. I think this is the thing for us to do, and I think that a foundation that was started by a guy who started out in Akron, Ohio, and because of this newfangled thing called a telephone, He was able, with help from others like Alva and his brother Jim, he was able to build what became in America in the 60s the largest newspaper company in America. That's fantastic. And he did it with the use of the latest technology. He was never afraid to try it out. Think about it, 1948, talking about faxing a newspaper to his customers. That's what we should be doing.
I agree. Yes, sir.
My question was, how much of an impact do your college and law school professors have on you and the great things you wanted to do afterwards? And what role do you think professors can play in that field?
I couldn't begin to measure it. One time I was talking with, I had to give a talk at Wesleyan, and I was talking with Vartan Gregorian, who's actually in one of those photographs. He was president of Brown. He was provost at I think it was at University of Pennsylvania. He was a distinguished professor. He was head of the New York Public Library. He's now the president of the Carnegie Foundation. He has cultivated his Armenian accent, another accent I can't do. But he said, Alberto, my friend, he said, when I am Vartan Gregorian, and he tells all of his various things, but when I go back to Stanford, I am a boy. There is no way. When I went back to Wesleyan, I have never been so, to give that talk, I've never been so nervous because I have never admired a group the way I admired the faculty at Wesleyan. They were, with all their failings, I mean it when I talked about keeping your heroes close to the ground. They were the brightest group of people who ever showed an interest in me. And to this day, I couldn't pay that back.
Yes.
I had a more general question for you. You spoke tonight about a lot of inspirational leaders, and I was wondering who has inspired you the most, and more importantly, why?
Well, I mean, we are here to talk about Alva, and he was clearly one of those. He had. You know, I happened to be liberal. He happened to be conservative. He was, believe me, in every situation, he was the boss and I was not. But that's just the way it was. But there was integrity. There was courage. There was an openness to discuss. That I found really compelling. I tend to really admire people who are willing to change, people who are willing to listen. I love that quote from it's actually from a tape where Jack Knight is talking toward the end of his life, where he says he wants to be known as a guy who prints good newspapers, is fair, open-minded, and opinionated. That's one day I hope, in fact, I may even steal that for my tombstone. I hope somebody says that, because you don't, who wants to sit around and say, oh, well, on the one hand this, on the other hand that? No, do your homework, do the reading, find out, be fair, open-minded, and then make up your mind. Go, move forward. With the kind of change that we're living, if you sit around, whatever your idea was last week is going to be old news. Do it, fail fast, learn, keep going.
Thank you.
Alberta, could I just say, and to everyone here, one of the things about Alva Chapman that I remember most vividly was his humility. I knew him when I was a lowly beat reporter at the Miami Herald, but I will never forget the day that I went when they began. The homeless assistance centers were just beginning. Alva had said, I'm going to help end homelessness or reduce it in our community. And there was a meeting, and there were about 20 people there. There were social workers. There were some homeless people. And here this great captain of industry, this fierce, brilliant man, sat there, and he said, I'd like to open this meeting with a prayer. Everybody held hands. And he said a little prayer, and then he sat and listened for an hour without saying anything and took notes. That humility was, I mean, only Alva. How about another question? Did you have a question, sir?
Good evening, Mr. Ibargüen.
Hi.
My question is, I find myself at times to strive to be a leader. When I'm working with groups, sometimes I find myself in the forefront, but at times I also feel that I should sit back and just let things flow. My question is, at what point did you realize that you had to step front and be a leader?
I don't know that you always do, honestly. I mean, I think there are some times when you simply have to say this isn't for me, or I can only, if I'm going to be successful at what I want to do, I have to prioritize. But my happy life has included so many opportunities for taking leadership roles. One of the first ones actually was after college. I signed up for the Peace Corps. They offer the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps claque is over there, and they're willing to take applications from any of you. Is it? But this is, and I applied, and of course I said I wanted to go to Africa, Asia, and they offered to send me to South America, but because I spoke Spanish, I was going to be given a job in Caracas as liaison between the Peace Corps and the Ministry of Development. We get to Caracas, and there's a list that's passed around, and it says my name, Ibargüen, and Puerto Ayacucho right next to it, and I look all over the northern part of the Venezuelan map, and I don't see Puerto, where 90% of the country lives, and I don't see Puerto Ayacucho, and I look all the way down at the bottom, and I see it says Puerto Ayacucho, Territorio Federal Amazonas. I'm from South Orange, New Jersey. They can't send me there. Not only did they send me there, they gave me a 16-page, single-spaced, typewritten plan. For those of you who don't know what typewritten means, it's a it's a thing that used to happen before computers, and they gave me a 16-page typewritten plan that talked about organizing the river merchants, because Venezuela was losing fiber to, losing market share to Brazil in the sale of a fiber that was exported from the jungle to Europe. What do I know about this? I really was from South Orange, New Jersey, and my degree, by the way, was in modern European history with an emphasis on the Spanish Civil War. So I get there and I figure, all right, well, so who's in charge? I'm 22 years old. I bought black dark glasses because men aren't supposed to cry, and at any moment I was going to break up. And I asked, well, who's in charge? And they said, El Gobernador. And I said, okay, fine, let's go see the Gobernador. What did I know? He was I didn't really think that he was but he was, after all, the governor of the Amazon territory, so he didn't have a lot to do, and he was available. And so we knocked on his door. He read the whole thing, point by point, slams down and says, this plan is another plan made in an air-conditioned office in Caracas. What do you want to do? And I was thinking, oh boy. So I said, well, Gobernador, I'm here to work. I said, let's find out what, and he said, great. So he sends me on a speedboat upriver. I go upriver and this is literally for a month and a half, come back, and I see and I said, Gobernador, this plan won't work. The problem was that the river merchants were the ones, from the Caracas point of view, who were the peasants who had to be organized. From Amazonas' point of view, they were the middle class that were controlling everything. They were the ones who were weighing the bundles that would weigh 50 kilos, I could read, and they would write 30 and add 20. The cutters, who were not literate, though, or numerate, but they weren't stupid, they knew they were being shortchanged, so they would stuff the bundles with all kinds of weight and so it's a long story, but I came back and I said, look, so here's what we do. We organize a co-op of the cutters, and we set up 15 different groups. I didn't know what I was doing, so this was a huge advantage. And I said, so the co-op will only accept bundles tied once at the head. So they were loose, and all of a sudden, my quality control problems were gone. The bundles used to be traded in exchange for goods that the river merchants would charge 100, 200, 300%. I literally saw this. And so we charged 1% over cost, because this is before handheld calculators and I was never very good at math. And so these guys would come in, they would bring tons of fiber, and they would walk away with all kinds of goods. Within 9 months, we had more demand than we had supply. It's not that you're born to this. It's not that you're even in some ways even trained for it. But if you listen and if you treat people with respect and if you pay attention, if you do that discovery part, if you find out what's actually happening, then you can begin, even with limited imagination that I had about this kind of business, you begin to figure out what's going on. The courage, well, the governor was on my side, so I figured, foolishly, by the way, I figured, because he ended up leaving, but I figured I'd have protection. Know-how, we got people who did know how, and tenacity is where it fell apart. And this I have to tell a story on myself, because a year and a half later, the Peace Corps pulled me out. When the governor was pulled out, the Peace Corps pulls me out. We didn't have the tenacity to stick to that program to go all the way through. And so when the governor left, and then when the Peace Corps pulled me out, basically it wasn't but a few months later when the new governor gave out the co-op goods to the others. But I know to the people of the Amazon, and you qualified as a poor person by showing the right color party card for Acción Democrática. I don't mean to make a political statement with that, but that happens to have been the party. And what always struck me as a shame, we didn't have that fifth leg of that five-legged stool. We didn't have it. I didn't know it. I wish I had. And it wasn't just because of the commercial value of what was happening. There was one night toward the end of my stay there when a man came. We were 2 weeks into the jungle, which is how you measure distance, by time. We were 2 weeks into the jungle, and this man, the captain of the group, came to see me and said, could I have permission, he asked, to go back to my village because my daughter, I have just got word my daughter has been bitten by a snake and they fear for her life. And I said, I cannot give you what isn't mine to give. You're the captain. You have to decide. I will support whatever decision you make. He couldn't have had a worse answer, because there was nothing in his background that prepared him for the person in my position to allow him the authority that we would all claim for ourselves. The next morning he was gone. I saw him a couple of weeks later. I saw him in his village, and I swear to you, for the first time we had known each other at that point for a year and a half, for the first time in our relationship, he looked me in the eye like one man to another. I'll never forget that.
All right, time for one last question, and you get to ask it.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. In listening to the conversation, I realized that both Mr. Chapman and Mr. Lawrence identified a need in the community, and they were both solved by taxing ourselves. Like you said, we have a sales tax for the homeless, and then we have the tax for the Children's Trust. Is there a situation or a need in the community today that you believe can be solved by the same means?
Wow. That is I don't know that I'm the right person to answer that. But I don't know that a tax is the issue, but if you think about the big ticket needs in this community, I can think of transportation as one. I can think of our public hospital as another. I mean, what do we think we're doing with Jackson? I think the leadership of Carlos Migoya and others is working very, very hard to make this thing right. But we cannot afford to have our main public hospital fail. We can't afford to have the kind of water situation that we are building. I remember Janet Reno came back from 8 years in Washington, and I asked her one time what had changed, and she said 300,000 more people and no more infrastructure. So I imagine those would be the kinds of things. But honestly, I'm not going to pretend that I could give you an answer like a tax is the answer, because I don't know that a tax is the answer. I believe that I believe in citizen leadership. I believe in information. I believe that an informed citizenry decides best for its community. How you apply that, how we get informed about these issues, and how we engage in activity really is. I know this sounds like 7th grade civics, but it's really up to us. And if it doesn't work, it's only because of us. It's not some fairy in the sky who made us do it. Nobody made us do it. We have the right and we have the power to make those decisions.
Let's all join in thanking Alberto Ibargüen.